Hey, what's up, guys? So, this is going to be the 52nd opening that I'm going to be sharing with you. This is Greenberg or Dawg opening. So, basically, this opening it's quite an uncommon variation and it's a spin off. As a player playing black, you would play this opening going into the rose or rabbit variation, and then from there, you actually take it on a different route and just vary it. So, it's somewhat of an uncommon variation even for modern players, even though I think there has been some players who have actually tried to specialize in it. So it's a very edge play dominant kind of opening for black. So if you go into the mid game, you tend to want to control the edge, and you want to also form like a six disc balance and solid edge. So in a sense that you actually form up an edge, and you also take the inner four squares of the inner A and inner B squares, and then you form a very solid edge, and the end result is usually a very one-sided. Either you win very big or you lose very big. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword kind of opening. And I think the cons of this opening is that it's somewhat of a late variation. So if you meet a player who is playing a very early variation, it'd be very hard for you to actually execute it. So if you really studied this opening very deeply, but your opponent can easily vary it out of it, then maybe the effort is probably not worth it in order to specialize in this. And also the follow up is kind of like a very narrow and limited options kind of follow up. So you have to really go deep in the book in order to capitalize on it. So let's take a look at the sequence. F5, D6, essentially C5, which is the basic rose variation, F4, E3, and then C6, and then F6, sorry, C6 and D3, and F6, and E6, and D7. So essentially, this whole sequence is actually the rose opening. And then finally, instead of playing the best move, typical best move, which is G3 or maybe even a flat opening to G4, you actually penetrate into the center with E7, which kicks off the variation of the Greenberg or Dawg opening. So the typical playout is that white cuts through to the center, which is fairly predictable because as white, you're flipping two discs in the middle. You're not creating many more moves, and the kind of trade-off is that black gets C4 as a continuation, and again white continues to maintain the center and play F3, and then black goes down the line to D8, this entire column, and takes the edge. So this is kind of like a typical response for the whole green book opening, and I think most players would actually know this book at least up to this stage. And white probably still knows C8, or maybe if white doesn't know the book opening, white may consider D2, which is the tail end of this entire column of discs, or even E2. So let's say if white goes to the standard book variation, black would grab the edge, and then over here, if white extends out or feed the edge, either one of the options will work. So if white goes here, then black would probably play to b6 as a variation that is possible to chase down this excess. So you create the c6 disc, you want to balance back, or you want to kind of cover your risk area here. So white doesn't take the prevention move, but rather takes this to feed off, and this is the typical sequence. And over here, black can either follow to g4 or go with a very aggressive g8. But g8, since it's more of a spare move, and if you play g8, you kind of create e6 that blocks yourself from removing the d7 disc in order to form like a solid 6 disc edge, which I mentioned earlier. So let's just, for the sake of the argument, let's play g4, and white goes to c3, or typically white will probably respond to either g5 or g3 possible as well. And then black goes in to just solidify this edge. So the purpose of g5 follow-up is for black to change the e7 disc into black. So once that is done, let's say if white were to go to g3, then in the future black can form a solid 6 disc edge to the bottom, and also have this being all black. So that usually results in a very double-edged sword kind of situation. You either win very big or you lose very big. So right now black plays to d2 to just kind of control the center, momentarily controlling this. So chances are that if white is not so familiar with the opening and white doesn't choose to play this and chooses to play maybe e1, then black can re-establish that solid edge that we talk about. So the strength of this solid edge being a 6 edge and together with the seventh row of this inner A and inner B squares is that you cut away a lot of excesses from this foundation. So therefore, white is kind of like scrambling for excesses. So this results in a very narrow fallout where both players mustn't make any mistake. So this kind of opening is really very good for people who are really edge play dominant. You know the edge play, you know excess evaporation techniques very well. You want to remove all your opponent's excesses and give him pressure. This is also very useful for maybe blitz games as well. So if your opponent is playing at a very fast pace against you, then this could actually force some errors on your opponent's part. Your opponent could accidentally play maybe b5 or other moves and wouldn't really consider h6 perhaps. Yeah, but of course over here it seems like h6 is arguably the most reasonable choice here. But yeah, forming this kind of shape basically results in forcing your opponent to usually have only one or two correct moves to follow up with, which is highly error prone. So that's probably one of the reasons why you might want to play this opening. So I would recommend this opening for advanced players and above, so people who want to specialize in black and more towards the rose opening. So yeah, so hopefully this opening is a useful one for you and you can go ahead and experiment it and hopefully it works out. So let's see you at the next opening then. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.